Gators breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Hopping on with me right now, co-host Will Miles at Will Miles SEC from Read and Reaction. And a little bit of breaking news we'll get into right here on this episode. That's why the episode was scheduled for 8:30. That was also the same time Davion Groce was making a commitment. And hey, it's not Oklahoma, it is Florida getting a commitment here. Kind of a surprise right here on this August 11th right here as we talk. We're going to talk a little bit of recruiting. We'll get into some fall camp. Billy Napier speaking to the media after Saturday's scrimmage for the Gators as well. So we'll get into what he had to say. We had this episode planned, where we're gonna talk about the safety group with Jordan Castell and Bryce Thornton talking last week, and J. Michael Sturdivant talking as well. Well, we'll take a little bit of a left turn, Will, and we'll talk a little recruiting this episode, and we'll hear from Billy Napier, of course. There's plenty of content, plenty of things to talk about. So I'll push the safety and wide receiver talk to later this week. But we got to talk about the breaking news of a commitment here and this Billy Napier reviewing the scrimmage on Saturday. So, hey, never a dull moment in Gator Nation. And rings true today.
It could be worse, man. This is, it's been a long time since Florida's had recruits coming in at this kind of level. Like, you look at their overall recruiting class for 2026, 18 commits, 91.55 overall, and now they add Gross to that ledger. 47th overall in the 24/7 composite, 97.9. He's going to raise that up. I mean, you get to 92, you're starting to be pretty legit when it comes to recruiting overall. Georgia right now is at 92.21 with 31 commits. We'll see how that works out. You got USC at 92.2. You got Notre Dame at 92.4. And like I said, Florida at 91.5, but probably closer to 92 when Gross is added to the ledger. So overall, the 2026 recruiting class starting to look really, really good for Florida. And obviously, if Lagway goes and balls out this year, that's all. That's with a 17-17 record for Billy Napier. The recruiting class taking an uptick, and certainly NIL and revenue sharing and all that stuff plays a role in terms of what's going on. But great to have Gross in the fold. Going into the state of Texas and bringing a guy out as well. Obviously, that's something that Napier's done pretty consistently over his time here at Florida, but doing it again. So, the reality is you want to lock down Florida, but if you're doing a decent job of locking down the state, well, now if you can go out and get these high quality top 50 recruits from the state of Texas, hey, go do it. Raid the cabinet, keep them away from Texas Tech, and we're good to go.
Hey, we've seen it the other way. We've seen Texas get their fair share of Florida targets. So it's good to go the other way. Texas not really in this one too much, and maybe more so early on, but this one thought to be a Florida-Oklahoma battle. Hey, we'll get into it right here, as I do every recruit and commit that commits to the Gators. So we'll deep dive right here and show some highlights of Davion Groce. But first, everybody hit that like button, like the commit, like what we're doing right here on Gators Breakdown. Subscribe right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform if you're catching the replay. Oh, and leave some comments because, this is a good one. Well, I mean, the highlights are good. But let's take a look at the player right quick. And as we do, everybody, you know how we do it. Gator Nation, we got to commit. And it is Davion Groce, athlete out of Frisco, Texas. He's played running back. He's played wide receiver in high school. And will be more of a wide receiver prospect for the Gators. Checks in with a good size, 6'1", 190 pounds. Now, I'm not going to lie. This one I thought had pretty much faded to Oklahoma. He visited Florida over the summer. And going into that visit, to the Florida visit, didn't think much of him because I just think he wouldn't be in the cards eventually. Well, that visit to Gainesville even surprised him and his family. Florida put themselves firmly in this battle. And I remember a message I got during this visit, Will, specifically to watch this one, to watch this commitment. Gators made a huge move, just kind of out of nowhere when Groce was on campus. He didn't raved about the visit. And then not long after that, he was just on commit watch. And even some talk that he was a silent commit after that visit. Well, some time came, and went, and nothing happened. There was talk of Oklahoma being able to offer earlier playing time, and that would be weighed heavily, and that playing time not be available at Florida earlier on, and it started to trend towards the Sooners, and maybe even Baylor getting more into it. So, we get past summer, and then this one just kind of dies. And then he announces that he's deciding today, kind of out of nowhere. I chalked him up to Oklahoma. Oklahoma media, recruiting media out there thought he was heading to Norman, but this staff didn't quit. Gross is for everything I know, Will, is at the top of the board. The staff really wanted him. This was, we'll get into the wide receiver class in just a second, but, Samorian Wingo from St. Augustine, Florida was kind of, overlooking. Florida would have taken a commitment from him, but Gross was higher on the board. Gross was the guy they wanted all along since he visited, and it was kind of clear that way. So Florida ends up getting their guy here, but top of the board for the wide receiver spot here for the Gators. Some stats right here. This past season, he played receiver and running back, like I said, as a junior, gaining almost 1,400 scrimmage yards, 12 offensive touchdowns, caught 43 passes for 702 yards and 5 touchdowns at 16.3 yards per reception, while rushing for 687 yards, 7 touchdowns on 11.8 yards a carry. He added 3 return touchdowns, 2 kick return, 1 punt return. In 2023, gained extensive snaps as a sophomore at running back and receiver then too. Accounted for nearly 1,800 scrimmage yards and 22 touchdowns. Ran for 936 yards and 13 touchdowns on 7.6 yards per carry, while catching 45 passes for 860 yards and 9 touchdowns on 19.1 yards per reception. And then in 2022, as a freshman, finished the season with 614 yards and 4 touchdowns on 7.2 yards a carry, caught 10 passes as a freshman for 158 yards. So let's see if I can pull up these highlights, Will, and let's get those going. Got to make them full screen, pull them right here into StreamYard, and we'll get them going. A lot going on tonight, so we'll get them going. But there, now we're caught up. So that's I don't know why it won't go full screen for me.
This is what happens when they do it right at 8:30, man.
That's what happens, yeah. I don't know. Well, let me stop sharing it right quick and bring it back. But I will. Well, I'll figure that out. Go with some of your analysis there of everything we just talked about.
Well, so, he's a Texas 5A 200-meter state champion. He's got some 100-meter times of 10.75 and 10.8. So, whenever I see 100-meter times, I go, all right, well, how does that compare to Percy Harvin? So Harvin ran a 10.6 when he was in high school. So Harvin's faster, but not that much. I think, this Groce really has a profile that's really familiar for Florida fans in that he obviously was a track star, given what I just said, but also played basketball quite a bit. And so, has that aspect of things. And look, he's got a ton of experience as a receiver and a ton of experience as a running back as well. And you think about what Florida's done with Trey Wilson and what I really think they're going to do with Trey Wilson this year is I think they're going to use Wilson all over the field. That's one of the reasons to have a guy like J. Michael Sturdivant. It's one of the reasons to be given these 5 stars in Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown all the time they are, is to be able to then do stuff with Trey Wilson where, we have a running back in. Oh, nope, we're going to split him out. And all of a sudden you get the advantage on the defense. And we've talked a lot about 11 and 12 personnel. Nick and I wrote in the preseason magazine about they were in it 99% of the time last year. Guys like this give you the ability to have the same 11 guys on the field, but have a different personnel package. And so not only is he a skilled player, but the specifics of where that skill lie bring significant value to a team. We used to sort of scoff, I think, when Grantham would talk about positional flexibility because, if you didn't have a very good linebacker, you didn't have a very good defensive end. He's going to be awesome doing both of those jobs. But that's not what this is, right? This is a guy who would be a top 100 recruit as just a running back. He's a guy who's a top 100 recruit as just a receiver. And being able to combine those two things really does bring significant value to an offense that can get stale, quite honestly, at times. And having, the ability to make modifications out of the same personnel package, I think is something that Florida and Billy Napier and Russ Callaway are looking for.
Yeah, so for sure, you mentioned Percy. That is a comparison that is going to get thrown around to Percy Harvin. And hey, I don't throw that around lightly. So, when you start hearing that come out of, Gainesville a little bit, it does kind of make the radar come up a little bit. Like, oh, okay. So, like I said, top of the board, staff loves this kid. Just huge target there for the Gators. Just knowing how much the staff wanted this guy and it ends up getting him. And to me, like I said, almost kind of just out of nowhere, this cause I thought it was left for dead after it kind of didn't happen after that visit and some of the good talk was coming and it just didn't happen. But getting it done here anyway. So highlights are up there. If you're watching the YouTube version, I'll restart some of them there. But Gabe Brooks of 24/7 Sports back in June offered this analysis of Groce. A dynamic offensive weapon, experienced at running back and receiver who could play either at the high major level. Owns a receiver bill with strong pass catching production. Let me get this restarted again. Owns a receiver bill with strong pass catching production, but verified athleticism particularly stands out when stacked versus running back class. That said, multiple sources indicate a desire to play receiver. Displays impressive body control and spatial awareness in the air and along the boundaries. Plays with some subtle speed-changing modulation evident in run-after-catch ability at receiver and second-level playmaking at running back. Unorthodox that appears somewhat tight-hip, but ankle flexibility shows in foot quickness. Texas 5A 200-meter champion as a junior. Field-stretching linear speed supported by multi-sport data, but a build-up runaway aids in reaching highest gear. Reveals some gear down when redirecting. Valuable basketball participation pervasive in NFL draft results across positional spectrum, but particularly frequent in skilled player pass catchers. Likely one of the top offensive playmakers in Texas high school football in the country for 2026. Projects as a high major receiver who can give you personnel game plan flexibility with a clear long-term NFL ceiling. And you go back to April of last year, and Gabe Brooks had this to say: unique offensive playmaker with big back frame potential, but extensive reps from the backfield and a line wide as a true receiver. Strong production in both capacities as a sophomore. Owns the coveted easy speed label, unorthodox, that appears somewhat tight-hipped again, ankle flexibility evident in foot quickness. So pretty much what he was saying again in June is what he said better in April. Possesses legitimate run-by speed as a perimeter receiver, top end gear, runs away from defenders. Well, as you said, the 10.900 as a freshman, dominant at running back, even with a tall, upright build. Competes against Texas 5A competition in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. So, of course, you don't scoff at the competition there. Projects as a difference-making, high-major offensive weapon who can foster personnel creativity. Long-term potential seems quite high, regardless of ultimate positional home. So, as I said, running back, wide receiver in high school, but going to be that receiver there for Florida. Obviously, having that background, you can see him in the Trey Wilson, Vernell Brown III, maybe roles that we've heard for those guys. But Will, just one more. I mean, you got a top 50-ish player here, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. You know, the Rivals ranking not that far behind either. You know, as I said, you know, he's 47th overall on the 24/7 Sports Composite, the 4th-ranked athlete there. Rivals is 60th overall, the 6th-ranked wide receiver on that service. And Will, you get to add him to a great haul of wide receiver class already for this Gators class, with the 6'5" Marquez Daniel from Alabama and the versatile Justin Williams from Gainesville. Both those guys are in the top 200. And this staff is once again now putting the potential of signing another really good wide receiver class, and this time back-to-back. You know, first you go back to the 2023 class of Trey Wilson, Aiden Mizell, and Andy Jean. And, Will, I won't forget when you kind of said, you know, it'd be good to just one of those guys show up. And Well, only one has shown up so far. We're still waiting on the breakout of Aiden Mizell. Andy Jean has since transferred, but I remember you getting scoffed at a little bit, saying, "Oh no, all three of these guys are going to be doing things." And well, history's an indicator. We'll see. See. But you go to the 2024 class, you had Tank Hawkins, T.J. Abrams, and then the last class, Dallas Wilson, VB3, Nashawn Montgomery, Muiz Tunkara as well. So recruiting at this position has just been really, really good since this staff, Billy Gonzalez comes in, takes over for Kerry Colbert after 1 year with Billy Napier's staff. He moved on to the NFL, bring back Billy Gonzalez. And I know a lot of people scoffed at that idea too. Why bring back Billy G? He can't recruit and all that. Well, back-to-back classes here, and Billy G's name comes up a lot when you talk about these recruits and Michael Sturdivant talking to the media and as a transfer talks about Billy G a whole lot. But you hear that name come up a good bit. But the recruiting at this position since Billy Napier's come in has just really been transformational. And really just, it's all potential right now, especially with that last class. But we've heard so much through spring, through fall camp. But it's been a position that looks so much better than when the staff took over.
Yeah, it's funny because the commentary that I made about the Gene, Mizell, Wilson class was really targeted towards that you need to stack at any position. That's what recruiting is about, right? Like the reason we knew that Georgia was going to be good at some point is because Kirby was just stacking talent after talent after talent. And that didn't mean that one recruit that he got was going to be awesome. In fact, that's what I wrote when he brought Carson Beck in. It wasn't that you knew that Beck was going to be awesome. It was that you knew that out of all the different guys he was bringing in, one of them was going to be awesome along that entire framework. And I think that's what we're finding, or at least that's what we hope to see when it comes to Florida at the wide receiver position, right? Like if Nashawn Montgomery turns into a star, then last year's class is awesome no matter what happens with all the other guys. Now, there's a possibility that if Montgomery turns into a star, that it's like a transformative wide receiver recruited class since you've got Brown and Wilson up at the top as well. But the reality is that the 5-star guys usually turn out about 65% of the time to the pros. And then if you look at the guys who are like top 50, top 75, they're like in the 30 to 35%. Then everybody else is basically 20% from there on out. So just from a statistics perspective, you got to stack people in order to be successful. Now, the nice part is if guys like Aiden Mizell and guys like Andy Jean are not successful, it may not be because they're not good players. It may be because Florida's brought in so much talent behind them that they just haven't been able to get on the field, right? Andy Jean looks at it and goes, geez, look at these guys that they're bringing in. Who knows why people transfer and all those different reasons. But, the room gets crowded real quick, right? We've even talked about this when it comes to the quarterback position. Who's really going to commit to Florida with DJ Lagway sitting there in tow? And you look at sort of the rumors this past week, or at least Wiltfong, I think, had stuff out there about a 5-star guy potentially coming to Florida in the 2027 class. Yeah. Well, it turns out that's right when DJ Lagway won't be there, right? So you have to stack these guys. And the reason you have to stack them is because of injuries. The reason you have to stack them is because they're not 100%. And neither is this guy, right? Like he's not 100% going to be an awesome player. But the thing that makes us really excited about the different recruiting classes under Billy Napier and Billy Gonzalez the last few years is if you get 1 star out of each of these recruiting classes, well, then all of a sudden 3 or 4 years later, you got 4 stars out there, right? Who are running around on the field. And part of their 11 and 12 personnel is intentional. They want to run the ball. They want to get big plays off of play action, especially with Lagway out there. And you got to show run from time to time. That means you got to have tight ends in there. But part of the reason they've run 11 and 12 personnel is they haven't had 4 or 5 wide receivers that were worth running out there onto the field over the tight ends to give better pass protection or give the appearance of run or something like that, right? And so I think one of the things I'm looking forward to this year, and certainly as the recruits come into next year's class, is you're going to have a quarterback next year, especially in Lagway, who's now established himself. Mm-hmm. And, if he's who we think he is, it's going to be a lot of fun and gun type stuff going on in the Florida offense. And what do you need for that? You need receivers. It's not a coincidence that when Steve Spurrier was here, it was like, one guy graduates. Oh, look, there's another guy who's out there catching 100 balls, right? It just felt like there was always 2 or 3 guys on the roster at any time who could go out there and just kill it. I mean, I remember when I went to college, Jabbar Gaffney was one of the ones who was like the new guy nobody knew about, who all of a sudden stepped up. I think it was my freshman year he stepped up there, and that just happened over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. And there you are pairing him with Rashae Caldwell and
absolutely
Taylor Jacobs right after.
Well, I mean, if you look back at Kwesi Green's time, I mean, he's obviously paired up with guys as well. So, and it wasn't just like those weren't the only 3 receiver recruits, put it that way, right? Like Spurrier hit because he had a bunch of them.
Yeah, 95, 96, Doring, Anthony, Green. I mean, Hilliard. I mean, it's just, and it just continued on.
Well, so it turns out that like getting weapons for a guy like Lagway is both important and also has been a priority. And however they've managed to do that, I do think that some settling in terms of what goes on with the NIL and what's accepted and what's not probably has been useful for this Florida staff overall. Sort of settling into what it's going to be, and also some settling in terms of like, what you can't do. Those sorts of things have become a little bit more clear. And so that's certainly, I'm sure, helped the Florida staff. But look, I mean, if you look back at where Florida's been the last 2 years coming into the season, it's night and day between the 2026 recruiting class and the 2025 and the 2024. The 2024 one at least had Lagway in it. So you could sit there and go, okay, we've got that guy in the class. The question then becomes, what else do you have? And I've been writing for years that basically where your player average is kind of is where it ends up. Now, there's some data that suggests with some flips late now because of NIL and because of the transfer portal, all those sorts of things. It's a little bit less true that where you are when kickoff happens in August is where you end up from an average player rating, but Florida's going to be right around 92 when the ball gets kicked off. They have not been anywhere close to 92 on an overall player rating the entire time Napier's been here. It's been somewhere between 90.5 and 91 pretty much the entire time. And I get it, like 90.5 and 92, that doesn't sound like a lot. That's the difference between like Alabama and Penn State.
Yeah.
like that's the kind of difference you're seeing. And look, Penn State, pretty good team. Penn State also hasn't beaten anybody in the top 10 in like a decade. So, there is a difference in terms of the quality of player that those programs are bringing in. And Florida is starting to ramp things up a little bit, which obviously is needed in the SEC, is needed for Billy Napier. And now he's got to win, right? I mean, now he's got to get the wins on the field so that these guys can come to campus, because that is the hanging chad here, right? Is that This only matters if Florida is able to convert all the recruiting, all the transfers, keeping guys in the transfer portal, keeping guys home on the defense, especially having Lagway stick around through all the noise over the last couple of years. That has to translate into wins. Otherwise, all this stuff ends up just being stuff we talked about in August and is kind of irrelevant when next August comes around. So hopefully, and obviously we're all hoping for that. And I think we all expect to see Florida win pretty big this year with Lagway at the helm.
All right, Will, so Florida came into the day 15th in the 24/7 Sports Composite, and they shoot up to 13th, passing FSU and Clemson, one spot behind Miami. Gross is the 19th commit of the class. All while teams around Florida have the 21, 22 commitments. As you said, Will, I just went up. You can sort by average now. So Florida is 10th in average, 91.55, as you mentioned there. So that's right below Texas, right above Miami. There when you sort by average. So as you said there, I mean you're as you said, going into the season there, up there with Texas, who's been a recruiting juggernaut and has taken a few from you in this recruiting cycle in years past as well. But certainly going to the state of Texas, getting a big one here in Davion Groce. So certainly, I like the versatility that he brings. Certainly like the speed that he brings. That's just another aspect to what you've seen from wide receiver recruiting with this staff. Will, is they really have identified we got to get speed here. Now you want size and speed, and you want speed in certain areas, but you want your receivers fast. And Billy Gonzalez under the previous regime had the, I guess, reputation of recruiting the big body receivers who really couldn't separate, more the possession type of receivers. That's not the case here. I mean, Florida has recruited legit verified track speed at this position to get this thing going. Kind of going back to what you said with the design of the offense. Yeah, it is it is 11, 12 personnel, play action, and they wanted to let you bite on that play action a little bit, one-on-one coverage, and just outrun those DBs. And man, they've seemed to really, really concentrate on speed at this position.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, let's be honest. I think Florida's probably had more speed than we give them credit for at the wide receiver position many times. But when you got Austin Appleby and Luke Del Rio and Graham Mertz and Tyler Murphy throwing the ball, I mean, look, it's sometimes it's going to be tough to take the top off the defense. Now, that doesn't mean that these guys aren't a significant upgrade. I mean, they got multiple 5-stars on the roster currently at the wide receiver position. I can't remember the last time Florida had multiple 5-stars at the wide receiver position. I mean, you go back to Shorter, was a transfer in. He was a former 5-star. You go back to DeBose. He was the only 5-star on the roster at the time.
I guess when Shorter and Grimes were together.
Yeah, but Grimes was sort of one of those tweeners where depending upon where you go in terms of like the rankings, like he wasn't a consensus 5-star guy. I mean, if you go back to Harvard, I don't even know that they had anybody else who was a 5-star at that point either. So the level of talent in the room, I guess my point is the level of talent in the room is pretty significant. And considering that you lost Badger, considering you lost Pearsall a couple years ago, considering you lost DK, like those are 3 highly, highly productive guys who haven't all had the same kind of profile coming in, but have been incredibly successful within the framework of this offense, and even without Lagway, right? I mean, you had Mertz being the one throwing to Pearsall for the most part. So there's been success at that position, and now you've got this guy who potentially can take that success to the next level. And so, I mean, if I'm a wide receiver recruit, I mean, there's 2 things. One, I love that campus. It's awesome that it's warm all year long. The co-eds are walking by all year long. Nobody's wearing winter coats, put it that way. Like there's some real advantages to being there. If the NIL money makes a difference, and if you look at Florida has pretty consistently now started to put wide receivers in the NFL under Billy Napier. Well, okay, why wouldn't you choose that as a destination, right? I mean, given Ohio State, I guess, is a place where you go, okay, yeah, but it's cold there. Am I going to Tennessee to play in that gimmick offense? Probably not. Am I going to LSU to receive passes from the Nussmeier brothers? Nah, probably not in on that either. So, I mean, I just look at it and say, like, out of all the places in the country, where would you want to go if you were a wide receiver who had deep pass catching skills? Like, I mean, where else would you want to go? And I mean, that's the only push I'd put on if I was Billy Gonzalez or Billy Napier. It'd be like, the old Marv Levy thing. Where else would you rather be than right here, right now? Like, this is the time. If you're a wide receiver and you can beat a corner deep, you are going to get a ton of opportunities with Lagway because he's going to take the shot. He showed us last year, like, sometimes it looks unorthodox and sometimes if it's a short throw, he might miss it. But man, they show middle of the field closed coverage and you're going deep as a wide receiver. The ball's coming your way and it's coming your way quick. So exciting time to be a Florida Gator, exciting time to be a Florida Gator receiver. And certainly I think that's showing up in the recruiting. For sure. So, all right, there you go. Davion Groce committing to the Gators. Big time pickup here for the Gators. And hopefully one more. Let me pull this one up here. Will, you teased it just a second ago, but we got to get into it because a lot of noise being put out today for a 5-star quarterback, Elijah Haven, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Will. Right there in LSU's backyard. Michigan gets a quarterback commit. Thought maybe it would be a Florida-Michigan battle here, but Elijah Haven, a lot of predictions for the Gators. Now, of course, 2027, so a little while away, but elite quarterbacks tend to go early when they commit. Well, he's a 5-star on both the services. He's 15th overall and the number 1 quarterback on the Rivals industry ranking, 94.79. He's the number 1 overall quarterback on 24/7 Sports rankings. You got to, you got Will Griffin coming in. That's been committed. He's been committed for quite some time. Get him a couple classes after DJ Lagway. Then Elijah Haven might be the next 5-star that Billy Napier brings in. And as you mentioned kind of earlier, we kind of time out with DJ Lagway, hopefully playing, his 3rd year
and going on. Hopefully that's the success he's having, where he's here 3 years and then going on to the NFL. And then you got a quarterback room that you can throw Elijah Haven in, but we'll see what happens. Tough to get too excited so far away, but you got to start somewhere. And the conversation right now for your 2027 quarterback is 5-star Elijah Haven.
Well, and it's funny because people have, including myself, have scoffed at the quote-unquote Clemson model. This is what it is. I mean, the Clemson model was Taj Boyd, hold up guys who aren't quite as good as everybody else, run through the ACC, though, because you've got Taj Boyd, have a couple of hiccups along the way, but, able to get to a place where you're playing in big-time bowl games, and everything looks like it's on the right path. And then Deshaun Watson comes in, and all of a sudden Clemson's winning national championships. And then after Deshaun Watson, they had the 1 year of Kelly Bryant, and then Trevor Lawrence comes in, and all of a sudden they're competing and a big time competitor. And they haven't hit. They had Yui Agalele come in after Trevor Lawrence, and everything sort of settled down after that. They're expecting big things from Klubnik this year. I don't see it, but we'll see what happens with Klubnik this year. But the reality is that for the most part in college football, unless you were like the elite of the elite of the elite when it comes to talent overall within your roster, you need an elite quarterback to make things roll. And so Haven's a big part of that. I mean, Griffin's going to be a big part of that. Lagway's a big part of that. I mean, I'm sitting here getting salivating at, you're telling me year 2 and year 3 for Lagway. I'm like, how much would we need to raise to get him to stay for the 4th year? Like what would it take in order to get that 4th year commitment out of Mr. Lagway? But I mean, look, this is the hope, right? The hope, and this is the needle Billy Napier has to thread. Like, he has to win while he's got Lagway at quarterback. And then once he wins with Lagway at quarterback, he's got to have a competent, if not elite quarterback to hand things over to. And whether that's Griffin or whether that's Haven or whether that's somebody else, he needs to have
Jones
that.
Tremel Jones on the roster, turning heads right now. So
certainly not Aiden Warner or Harrison Bailey from what we're hearing so far. So, yeah, I think this is the path, right? The path is that you put enough weapons around a young guy who's going to come in, who's highly talented, and all of a sudden he'll look a little bit better than he is to start with, and then he'll grow into who he needs to be. But that all starts with having Lagway being ready to go, like right off the bat when he comes in and ready to win games. And, look, this staff isn't even here if Lagway doesn't do what he did the last 4 games last year. And so I think there's there's more hope within the Florida program than there has been for a while. And again, I think the idea that Lagway is a 2-year window regardless means there's also more stability at the head coach and staff positions than there has been over the last couple of years as well, right? When Lagway was just a thought experiment, when it was just if he comes in and can be elite, then Florida can be good. The heat was pretty hot under Billy Napier, and I'm sure the players and the recruits all felt that. Now you've got Lagway really as a proven player coming back for his 2nd year of starting in the SEC. Mm-hmm. And if he's going to be back for year 3, no one in Florida is going to suggest that Billy Napier should be jettisoned if it means that you're going to lose Lagway along the way too. So it's a 2-year window. There's time for Napier to prove things, which means I think probably on the recruiting trail that now there's a little bit more certainty, time to build the relationships with these guys over a multi-year period. And you don't have to play defense the whole time, right? You can now start projecting hope and strength as opposed to projecting survival, which is probably where they've been the last couple of years. So, yeah, look, I think 2 years ago, it was hard to see how Florida was going to get here. And credit to Napier and credit to his staff that they've been able to get to this point. Now the question becomes, can you do what you need to do as you go forward? But Haven's a big part of that. And everybody knows how big I am on completion percentages. Completion percentage 2 years ago was, I think, like 67%. Last year, it dropped to like 61 or 62. And so I'm interested to see what he does to see where he would project. But from a skills perspective, he's a big-time prospect and certainly somebody that Florida would be interested in having.
Yeah, he on the 24/7 Sports composite, 26 overall, and the number 1 quarterback there. So it seems like a Florida, LSU, and Alabama battle as we get to the fall here. Scouting report for him, and then we'll move on to Billy Napier and his feedback from the scrimmage. Scouting report here for Elijah Haven. Supersized quarterback with first-round pick potential if he can put it all together. possesses an excellent combination of strength and athleticism to go along with impressive competitive drive and football character. Earned Max Prep's National Sophomore Player of the Year honors after a 10th grade campaign in which he posted a 14-1 record and accounted for 56 total touchdowns. Showed everything you want to see from a young signal caller in a championship setting as he mounted a comeback effort with his arms and legs while taking his fair share of blows. Has frequently been featured on design runs and has both the power and agility to boost a rushing attack, but is more than capable of winning through the air and from the pocket. Excels at getting the ball out quickly to the perimeter and is one of the best in the class when it comes to challenging defenses vertically as he throws targets open and hits them in stride and touch. Will connect on his fair share of in-breaking routes, but needs to improve at driving the ball toward the middle parts of the field and learn how to consistently beat tight coverage windows. Shakes off plenty of would-be sacks with a sturdy base and can thrive in escape mode as he keeps his head up and hunts big plays. Must cut down on the mental lapses and keep progressing as a passer, but has the tools to emerge as a force multiplier on Saturdays and potentially on Sundays. That from Andrew Ivins on 24/7 Sports. So, seems Will you go back to Levi Lewis at Louisiana under Billy Napier, DJ Lagway. I mean, you kind of just can, the versatile type of quarterback that can make plays with his legs, but prefer to stay in the pocket, make plays in the pocket, only use the legs, design runs to keep the defense honest, extend some plays, but it's arm first, leg second.
Yeah, I mean, so the needs development part of it does make me feel, it seems a little Felipe Franksy in terms of the description a little bit, but at the same time,
I mean, he is how old?
Yeah, well, again, I mean, Franks was like the same age when they were looking at that sort of stuff, right? So, I think there's a lot to be excited about. I think, anytime
first it's got to happen too.
Well, that too, right?
I don't usually go this far into a guy who hasn't committed to Florida, but it was big news today.
Well, and it should be. Anytime you've got 5-star quarterbacks potentially considering your program, it is a big deal because those guys, there's 2, maybe 3 of them every year, like maybe. And even then, the guys who are ranked like 29th are very different than the guys who are ranked first. And so, Lagway was number 1. That's why we've spent so much time talking about him, even before he ever even before he put a foot on the field. But now that he's done that, we all see, oh, okay, like there's real value here. Like, what a shock. And, so I think there's immense value in looking forward. There's more, to me, it's more value in terms of what is the perception of the Florida program to the guys who are out there, right? If you've got guys who are projecting 5-star wide receivers, 5-star quarterbacks, 5-star defensive ends, 5-star corners, like the premium positions, if those guys are getting projected to Florida early on, well, now you're starting to recruit like the big boys. Like, Lagway was an early commit, but then LJ McCray came right down to the final, facts right at the end. Let's stack 3, 4, 5 of those guys all up at once where they're the core of the class before you even get to the end. If Napier can start doing that, well, now he's starting to mimic the things that the big boys, the guys who've dominated for the past 10, 15 years have done repeatedly. And, obviously that's the direction we want to head.
There we go. So getting you caught up in a little bit of recruiting here. It's been a while since Florida had that run of commits there in the summer. Big commit there with Davion Groce today, and then some big news there on the quarterback front for Elijah Haven. So there we go. Getting caught up in the big news of recruiting right now for the Gators. So, all right, let's get it back to fall camp. Billy Napier speaking to the media a couple of days after the Saturday scrimmage. So let's hear Napier on the scrimmage and the latest on DJ Lagway.
Our team, this is a critical week. It's a really, really important week in training camp. We have to do our best work this week. And, it's one thing to practice like you want to win. It's another thing to practice like you want to win a championship, right? So the level of detail this week has got to ramp up. The quality of the execution has to improve. But in general, I think that this group has taken the right approach. I've been very pleased. We had Shep in here last week. He did a great job. He talked about getting the big rocks in early, and you guys have all seen that video online, the viral video. And I think it's important for our players to evaluate themselves and have the self-discipline to put together a plan for their day, plan out their work and then go work their plan. I think the chemistry of this team has impressed me, and overall like the attitude of the team. In terms of the scrimmage, status quo, when you're pleased with one side, you're not pleased with the other. So pretty back and forth. For the most part, came out of it pretty healthy, just your typical bangs and bruises. So in general, we're back at it, and I thought we started the week with some juice today.
When you say like one side and not like the other side in the scrimmage and so forth, in your opening statement, is there a certain side that's ahead right now, offense ahead of defense, defense ahead of offense, or how do you view it?
I think defensively probably a little bit further ahead just because of I think we're without a few players on offense, right? So I think that affects our ability to perform. But today, the offense won, right? So I think the defense had some rookie players that had to emerge in the two deep today and had to take reps, and I think they felt the urgency of having to perform when the spotlight was on. So, look, I think when you're evaluating, you're playing against yourself, it's important. I told the team on Sunday, look, I think before we start this 56-play cut-up, let's preface this with when I'm complimenting one side, typically the other side is contributing to that. So we need to eliminate the negative plays on offense, and we need to eliminate the mental errors and missed tackles on the defensive side. I think, and then overall, the quality, the execution, the attention to detail, the synchronization of the play, right? I think all those have to improve, and we're on schedule there.
How about DJ on schedule? How close is he to the full workload? But game Saturday, you're opening Saturday. Was he ready?
Yeah, we don't play Saturday.
That's what I'm saying.
But
how close is he?
I think he's doing great. I think he's on schedule. He's executing our plan. I think he had a great day today. I think he had his best day today. He took more reps today than he's been taking. Obviously, he didn't participate in the scrimmage, but he's hitting all of his numbers from a throw perspective. The ball's coming out of his hand with more velocity than any time in his career. I think he's just obviously we're working on the soft tissue with the calf, and we're gonna execute our plan there.
All right, well, executing the plan there with DJ Lagway, and nice little update there, of course, throwing more than he has. And, of course, we've talked about this. Dating back to spring, fall camp, and with the calf injury now, and, it's just kind of he's a star of college football. I know some people may be tired of hearing about this side of DJ Lagway, but there's an update from the head coach, and somewhat doing more than he has been, and nice velocity on the ball. Seeing what you need to be seeing. I think you'll probably wrap it up 11-on-11 work pretty soon, if not today, in that practice setting. So we can go in many ways with this. First of all, I know we kind of joked before we came on here. Practice to win a championship. That was, forthcoming. I know I put out a tweet today asking people what they thought of, the scrimmage or what Napier had to say about the scrimmage. And that was one quote that did catch some people's ear when Napier talking about, kind of the practice to win a championship is a whole lot different than just going out there and practicing. It's a whole different threshold that a team has to meet to meet those type of expectations. So hopefully it's not just lip service. We'll find out in these 12 games coming up this fall. But, that takeaway, the Lagway takeaway, and they pretty much just going against each other. When something good happens on one, it's bad with the other. There with the big takeaways, we'll get to some more takeaways, but that was the kind of the sound that I wanted to put out from Napier today.
Yeah, well, that's throwing down the gauntlet, isn't it, buddy? That's one where, not ambiguous at all
Yeah.
in terms of his expectations and what they're chasing after. And good, that's what you should be chasing after at Florida. The expectation is championships, and that's why it's been disappointing that the team is 17-17 in his tenure. Now, those are big words for a guy who's 17-17 in his tenure so far, and those are big words for like all the stuff about executing their plan and that they're on a good path and all that sort of stuff is a little bit muted by the fact that they have the Sharks and then South Florida to start the season. And so, they're not necessarily jumping right into the Hurricanes or jumping right into the Utes like they have the first 3 years of Billy Napier's career. But, that plan hasn't been ready week one the last couple of years. And so, to me, that's the thing is he's talking about eliminating mistakes and missed tackles on defense and missed assignments. He's talking about eliminating the negative plays on the offensive side of the ball. Certainly the conundrum for fall camp and even spring camp as well. We always talk about spring lies, fall lies is, you never know. Is the defensive line dominating because the offensive line terrible? Or is the offensive, or are the defensive players actually really that good, and they're going to cause problems when it comes to end season? So a lot of that is sort of, he even mentioned it. Sometimes if the offense is doing something bad, the defense happens to come up with a win. So look, I think talk is cheap when you've got seasons below 500 under your belt, when everybody is like thrilled with an 8-5 season, right? Like 8-5 last year. And, you and I my preseason magazine has Florida in the playoffs. So it's not like I don't see the path to this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I'm not excited about where we're going. What I will say is that, you should probably be practicing like it's for a championship, like day one when you come into the program, right? Like in fact, that's one of the things that might disturb me a little bit about that statement. Again, I think in some ways it's just setting the tone for the season. But, I'm a big believer in you practice the same way, regardless of whether you think you have a chance to win a championship or you don't, because that's how you get there, right? You build those habits year after year, practice after practice, day after day, week after week. And so hopefully that's what he's talking about, is building those habits early on in August, so that when it comes time in October where they're putting in the practice time during the week, that the expectations from the staff for the players and from the players for the players are set and established so that they can hold each other accountable. Because let's be honest, the coaches can do a lot in terms of setting the tone and the vision and that sort of stuff. But the reality is that you watch like that Swamp Kings documentary, they weren't talking about, Billy Gonzalez holding the wide receivers accountable. Like they were talking about, Brandon Seiler coming in and like motivating everybody for the entire team. And that's really what you need. You need those leaders on the team to step up, understand what the expectations are, and then hold everybody accountable. And that's how you build championship practice habits in a championship team. And hopefully that's what we're going to see coming up this year.
Yeah, something I think they, unfortunately, but I'm still grateful, I think they learned when, maybe we make too much of it, but go back and, circling that first bye week after last year. And look, we've heard the players mention it, and the coaching staff kind of just admit and mention it as well, that, hey, we had to change some things. And maybe it wasn't there, the first few years under Napier, and something needed to change. And we go back and circle that time. If Napier goes on to be here for quite some time, I think we will go back and look at the first bye week in the 2024 season because I don't think it is lip service. I mean, we've heard it from the players, we've heard it from the coaches. I don't think it's been drilled into their heads that, hey, this is what you talk about. No, I think there was some philosophical shift. It sucks they had to learn it, that it took 2 years to learn what the process needed to be, but at least somewhat now that there's something they can go back to say, hey, that's what we need to do. This is how we need to practice. This is how we need to approach our program moving forward. And maybe that is the practice like a champion, type of mentality that they found in that first bye week last year. So look, even that could be lip service. I think it played a ton of difference last year. Does it pay a ton of difference this year? And it's one of those things that has to carry over from last year to this year. I think it was a moment in time that you circle it. I think it did mean a lot. Will it carry over?
Well, so there's a couple things there, or a lot of different things there. One is, I think it actually highlights maybe one of the biggest criticisms of Billy Napier is that if you think back to the Urban Meyer era, like in the bye week before the Georgia game in his first season, he's like, all hands on deck. It's not going well. And there were like 7-1 at the time or something like that. And he's like going crazy. And calling people in and making changes and they bring in the fullback in that game against the Bulldogs and installed new stuff. And I think setting the expectations that there's going to be urgency and that there are going to be expectations are important. So yeah, it's taken Napier and his staff a little bit longer to get to that. I would not underestimate the fact that they essentially shelved Austin Armstrong after that bye week as well. That Ron Roberts, I think it was one game after the bye week, they asked Napier who was calling the plays, and he said Ron Roberts. But there's a philosophical shift on defense as well. But also, I think in many ways that philosophical defense was tied in with, look, Roberts seems kind of like a hard ass and seems like somebody who isn't going to take missed assignments. He's going to simplify things. But now you have no excuse to make a mistake, right? Can't be like, oh, that guy next to me didn't do what he was supposed to do, so I was covering for him or something like that. It's like, nah, you got one job here. We're playing cover 2 or cover 4. Like, that's all we got. Like, we're not doing anything. Go win the rep. And the minute they started saying that, it's funny because other than the Texas game, and that does sort of cloud my overall thought process and all of this stuff, but other than the Texas game, what really happened from that bye week on is Florida started winning way more reps than they had been winning the previous 4 weeks. That, it wasn't this sort of tentative, like, well, we gave up 5 yards on that run. No big deal. 2nd and 5. It's like, no, we're actually going to win on first down. We're going to have some tackles for loss. We're going to, take on a double team and drive them into the backfield. Like guys like Pyburn, guys like Gates, like those guys really came on with an attitude that I think the team needed. So, the team kind of took on the attitude that I think was established during that bye week, but that only matters if things change, right? And so, like I said, Urban Meyer years ago pulled everybody aside during the bye week and probably made it hell for all those guys on the team during that week. And, took Napier a couple of years, but that might be the thing in the documentary, 20 years from now when they're talking about, the Billy Napier era at Florida and how we almost ran him out of town, myself included. They're going to be like, people just needed to be more patient with him. He knew what he was doing. He was building this whole thing. It's like, I don't know. I think in some ways there was some desperation there after the Blitzkrieg against Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And, it was like, to your point, like there was finally an acknowledgement of this, hey, we have a plan. We're going to execute a plan. It's like, well, the plan hasn't worked the first 3 weeks of the season or the first 4 weeks on defense. Maybe we ought to find a different plan. And, they made an adjustment, maybe a series of adjustments, and it paid off. So we shall see, right? There's one of the things that I highlighted in the preseason magazine was that to go from 6-6 or 5-7 to 8-5 is a pretty small jump in points for versus points against. Like there's not a huge difference in terms of point differential. Now you're a better team when you're 8-5, no doubt, but it's a relatively small switch. Like you can make changes around the edges and improvements around the edges and make that change. Going from 8-5 to 10-2 is a much bigger jump than going from 4-8 to 8-5. Like it's just the reality. And so Florida has to make a bigger jump this year than they did last year. But again, look, you got to build somewhere. You got to start somewhere. And if they got those practice habits built in last year, then good. They were able to establish that, it's no longer the players then trying to buy into, or the coaches trying to get the players to buy in that this stuff will work. The players have now seen it work, which means, again, those guys holding each other accountable to a certain standard starts to become the thing you look for because they've all seen it work and they've seen what doesn't work. And so if they see someone heading off in that direction, they hopefully will be able to come beside them and help course correct.
A couple more, or a few more. Let's do some quick hitters here, Will, from some of Napier's press conference today as well. On freshman Vernell Brown III, one of the emerging players in camp, in my opinion, Billy Napier says. He's mature. I think he's durable. He plays fast for a young player. It's not too big for him. I think he's very comfortable in the moment. He's got a chance to impact our team as a freshman. Not a day goes by where I'm not impressed with him. I put out the episode yesterday with the scrimmage. You saw the touchdown pass from Aiden Warner that VB3 was on the receiving end of. And, look, we talked about receiver in recruiting earlier this episode. We've lauded Dallas Wilson and Deshaun Montgomery and all that, but Vernon Brown III, kind of a deep dive from Billy Napier in a press conference setting, as can be here. But certainly, yeah, a true freshman that I think, whether it be in the receiver room, inside, outside, and on special teams, Vernon Brown III is going to have the ball in his hands at point this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, you got to get the ball in your playmaker's hands. And when you get a guy who's a 5-star recruit come in, he's a 5-star for a reason, right? Like, and wide receiver is a place where even if the playbook is limited, like you have the ability to get a guy out there with special skills and even within a specific package, get him the ball within that space. And given Lagway's special skills and ability to throw deep, I think there's going to be guys who have the ability to take advantage of that, both over the top, but then guys who will have the advantage to take, we talk about, I sort of reference flood routes all the time because you got a guy going deep and a guy coming intermediate across. That was Badger and DK last year. The guy going deep was Badger, and the guy going across was DK. And it turned out those guys both got hit quite a bit by Lagway going down the field. The short guy is the guy who gets the short end of the straw when it comes to Florida's offense with Lagway in there. So, I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? I mean, Florida's got all these guys who every time anybody brings them up, they're like, oh, this guy's doing great in camp. This guy's doing great in camp. This guy's doing great in camp. Makes me worry a little bit about the corners. But other than that, I mean, the fact that, like, you hear something about one specific guy and you go, okay, like, are they really building him up? Yeah. But you hear it about 5 different guys at wide receiver. You're like, okay, even if they're lying, like in some capacity, they feel really good about that room. And they feel like there's a real ability to leverage the talent that they have. And like, I mean, so I would not be surprised. Like, I would not be disappointed if both Wilson and Brown caught 15 to 18 passes. Like, I think most fans would be disappointed with that. But if you get 36 catches out of your 5-star receivers as true freshmen, you've basically guaranteed those guys are going to be solid SEC receivers given past history for the next 2 or 3 years. Now, if one of them turns into Jeremiah Smith, all right, well, now we got a completely different story. My guess is that that's a pretty rare occurrence. You're going to have some guy run a roughshod over all of college football who would have been the number 1 draft pick if he'd have been eligible to leave for the NFL. Like, that's not always going to happen. Right. But in this case, look, if you get 30 catches from each of those guys, that is really, really significant. 5-star wide receivers, even like I think Harvin had like 32 catches his true freshman season. Obviously, a big part of that team won the national championship, but it wasn't like he was catching 14 balls a game. So I think we need to temper expectations in terms of what good is from a true freshman wide receiver. All at the same time going, these guys have the ability to catch 35 or 40 balls. If they do, that is a really, really, really good season. If they catch 20 to 25, they're still really up there in terms of where they're at. If they catch less than 10, then I think we can be disappointed. But it's good to hear, obviously good to hear that Florida seems to have quite a bit of talent in that room, not just from the recruits who are coming in, but certainly from those guys as well.
Well, on the other side, let's go to defensive line. Napier on Jamari Lyons comeback. He's back. I think he's chomping at the bit. He had a good day. He just continues to get better and better. He's getting in football shape. You can see some of the twitch coming back, and obviously he plays with passion and he helps everybody, and he helps keep everybody accountable. Somebody who I think if plays up to the potential right there beside Caleb Banks, it's just the frontline talent for Florida's front seven. I think I don't really want to shy away from it. I think that's going to be a really, really good group. We got Banks, and if Lyons is what I think he can be, paired with Tyreek Sapp and those group of linebackers that I'm telling you, inside the building, they think that group is among the nation's best. And I know when we go through preseason magazines and we have people on and talk about, it's kind of, for Florida's linebacker room, you don't see it maybe in the unit rankings so high in the country or in the SEC. I know in that building, they're a lot higher on that group than outside the building, and I think rightfully so. I think Florida's defensive line and linebacker group is going to play major dividends, and I think part of that is going to be Jamari Lyons bouncing back from that injury. I think there is some depth there, but I'm talking about frontline talent. I think that front seven for Florida is going to be very, very good SEC quality type of players.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to a guy named Paul Wadlington who writes the 2025 Longhorn Football Prospectus. So certainly somebody who's got a very similar business model to what I do, which is why I was talking to him, but or why we were talking to him. But one of the things he said was he was talking to some guys at Texas about who the most physical teams that they faced in the SEC were last year. And it was fascinating to hear him talk about it, because he said one of the reasons he's picking Florida to be really good this year is because the Texas guys were saying it was Florida. And considering that Florida got absolutely mauled in that game, I was very, very surprised to hear that. But I think the limitations at quarterback were one of those things where they said, okay. But, apparently their defenders, like from an offensive line perspective, we're saying Florida was really physical. And then on the defensive side of the ball, that they were pretty physical as well. So Lions certainly adds to that. I think it's hard to rely on somebody, especially early in the year, who's coming off of a pretty significant injury. At the same time, Florida needs depth at that position. One of the things that we've talked about is who's behind Banks, who's behind Sapp. And even if Lions isn't elite, just being essentially above average really does give Florida significant value, because you get reps at a position, allowing your elite guys to rest so that when they come in, they can be difference makers. Because we saw it a few years ago with Gravon Dexter, where all of his stats in the first half were just awesome. And then in the second half, he was a below average player. And it was all because he played like 90 steps a game, because Florida, one, couldn't get off the field, and two, didn't have any other defensive tackles to help the poor guy. And, I think that's something that certainly Lions brings at a minimum, is SEC experience and the ability to at least sort of, provide replacement level play. And then the question is, and then the feather in that cap is he does have the ability and projects eventually to be significantly above average. And then the question becomes, can he get there this year coming off the injury?
Yep. And then we'll finish it up here. A little bit of injury news. LJ McCray went down with an injury last week. Was scary till the scans came back. Hopefully back in a couple of weeks. But we've been talking about it on the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord. So some users in there. I don't want to say his name out loud because I'm not sure. I hadn't talked to him if he wanted me to put his name out there in podcast form yet. So I won't put it out there. But he was letting us know pretty early on that something was going on with LJ. But then the scans happened late last week. Got the good news that it wouldn't be anything season ending. So hopefully back in a couple weeks for LJ McCray. Happening in practice last week. But we'll miss some time. But that edge spot, Florida's pretty deep there. As we talk about, a front seven for Florida. If there's a place that I think they can't afford an injury, that would be one of them. I don't know if LJ McCray can afford the injury, but certainly wish him a speedy recovery. Get the 5-star back out there and go to work and hopefully live up to the potential that we've put on him this year.
Yeah, well, he's the guy I've been pointing to all year as the one who, if he steps up or someone steps up to really give significant pressure off the edge, all of a sudden the Florida defense looks way different than it has for the past 3 or 4 years. McCray's the guy with the pedigree to do it. Now the question is, will he be able to stay healthy? And obviously, can he live up to that potential? Florida doesn't have, I know they've got a lot of depth at the position, but they don't have guys, in my estimation, that project to be true difference makers. And McCray is a guy who potentially projects to be a difference maker. And so that's what you're losing if you lose him for any significant amount of time. Now, again, I think one of the things that really has left me encouraged about this year is that Florida doesn't have to start with the gauntlet right off the start. Like you think about it last year, you've got Miami and Texas A&M in the first couple of weeks. And then even in Napier's first year, you had Utah and then had to come right back with Kentucky the next day or the next week after that high against the Utes on the walk-off interception. And so, Florida has had to get into their schedule right away. And any injuries during fall camp, it wasn't like you could sort of allow someone to ease their way into the season. It was, no, we need that guy out there right now because otherwise we're going to struggle. And so they don't have to do that this year. And I think that makes a difference.
Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you there how long you want to go, but I wanted to jump in there before we went somewhere else with that, because remember 2 years ago, Florida goes on the road against Utah, the Thursday night opener. Oh my, Kingsley Qualkin's not playing. There's Jake Slaughter making his first meaningful game snaps out there, and he looked like a new guy out there. Well, eventually, look what he eventually turned into. I mean, I remember that year, as he started racking up the snaps, like, Florida might have something here. Now, it didn't look like that game won. But eventually, you started thinking, hey, Florida might have something here in Jake Slaughter. And I think he's exceeded our expectations from that point. But, good point. You didn't get to ease into Utah. You didn't get to have a couple of games where Jake Slaughter could go, all right, well, Kingsley's hurt. Let's play these first couple of games and get the reps. No, he's right there on the road in a raucous environment Thursday night to open the season up at Utah, and you could tell. But if he'd have had Long Island and USF before, maybe Florida's offensive line is not in such a bad shape in Utah. So, yeah, a good point, I think, to kind of bring it to maybe one of the most, I think, recent stories for Florida. That would be one of them in that regard.
Well, I think you could say that for the overall depth of the program too, right? So, like, if you're opening up a game against Miami last year, do you have these? If you're opening up against Miami like you did last year, would you have Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown as giant parts of your game plan when they haven't set foot on a college football field yet? Or do you rely on the guys you've already got who maybe are going to be displaced later on in the year? But you're looking at it going, those are the guys I trust. They've been out there to start with. And so, your point about Slaughter is a great one. But I even think about a guy like Lagway, who comes in last year and looked terrible in the second half against Tennessee, other than the one touchdown throw that he makes. And just, look, I mean, on the road, tough situation. All of a sudden now you have to have the entire playbook at your fingertips instead of just your select plays. And it took Lagway a little bit of time to get his feet wet and be able to go and play the way you need to play. Now, look, the next week against Kentucky absolutely lit things up. So, special players make special plays for those and can make that jump, I think, differently than some other folks. But again, those two games easing into the season, I think, make a difference. And honestly, I think we're even going to see this for some other programs as well. LSU might be 1-2 after 3 games. I mean, they're already talking about knee injuries with Nussmeier, but even with Nussmeier, I mean, you got Clemson, and then who do they have?
Florida 2 weeks later.
Yeah. So I mean, they might be 1-2 after 3 games, and it might be a couple of beatdowns depending upon who they've got at quarterback, and considering they're replacing 4 of their offensive linemen. And, things change fast in the SEC, and the narrative starts very early if you're unsuccessful early on. There's, we all know that Florida should be and will almost assuredly be 2-0 coming into game 3 this year. When's the last time Florida was 2-0? When's the last time Florida played 2 teams to start the year where we went, they will most definitively be 2-0? I mean, maybe when they still had Tennessee as like the 3rd game of the year.
Was it 2021?
I mean, I'd have to go back and look. Yeah. I mean, it would have been under a Mullen.
Yeah.
A Mullen. Maybe that 2020.
I mean, Mullins last year? What did they open up?
Didn't they have Alabama real early?
No, Alabama was the 3rd week. There you go. Had Florida Atlantic. Week 2 did have South Florida. So.
Yeah, that was the Anthony Richardson game.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson.
Every time he touched the ball, he scored a touchdown.
Yeah, so there was your last 2-0 start, by the way.
Oh, well, there you go. So 2021 was the last 2-0 start. And God help Billy Napier if they don't have a 2-0 start this year. So looking forward to that. And, look, I mean, like I said, if they take out LSU and LSU's 1-2 and Florida's 3-0 coming out of that game in Baton Rouge, the narratives of Brian Kelly, the narratives for Billy Napier, the narratives for Garrett Nussmeier, the narratives for DJ Lagway, very different than what we've had the preseason. Things change quickly in college football. And those 2 games, I do think, especially for teams that have expectations, allows them to sort of ease into things and can be a big deal if you're ready to make a run.
Quick question. I did want to, kind of on that same topic now, I did want to ask you this, but I was trying to get the episode done, but I think I have to ask you now. Going back to Lagway, going back to what we just discussed, I brought this up on the last episode about not really feeling too worried yet that Lagway not doing 11 on 11 and the pass rush in his face and all that kind of stuff. Is there a threshold for you when you would want to hear Lagway doing 11 on 11? I mean, are you fine with no live action until LIU or LSU, since that's the first big game? Do you want live game reps before LSU? Like, personally for you, I want more. Like, I hope versus LIU is like a quarter of live reps. USF maybe a half of live reps. I don't want the first meaningful snaps for DJ Lagway look, if they want to be overcautious, I'll still take that and reduce the injury risk before you play LSU. But at the same time, ideally, and there's nothing ideal about this whole situation, but this is what we're dealing with. I'd like to have some live reps before going to Baton Rouge.
Yeah, well, I mean, so eventually we will be playing Saturday, and so Napier will have to answer the question. I mean, so
does concern slip in your mind at any point for a timeline? Like, where's your timeline on that, I guess?
I mean, so no, because Florida has the ability to lose 3 games and still make the playoff.
Okay.
So, and I think if Lagway is making is bad and has his first game against LSU and they lose, and that's the first reps he had all year long, if he balls out the rest of the year and you make a playoff run and you're trying to make arguments against other folks, the schedule is good enough and Lagway will be good enough that it doesn't really matter. I think 5 years ago it would have been like a 5-alarm fire here going, we got to get him a little bit of time against these guys because one slip up and we're done, right? Like Alabama's going to go undefeated in the West. If we lose one game in the East, maybe we make the SEC championship game, and then we got to beat Alabama to go. You can't lose that SEC championship game already having one loss and still go to the playoff. So 4 or 5 years ago, there's a lot more urgency. I think from a player health perspective, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but from an urgency perspective, early in the season, there's an ability to recover from a loss that has not been there the last few years. So I think, I'm not necessarily going to be like thrilled if he's making his first appearance, and I won't know how to pick the game, right? It'll be one of those things where it's like, all right, well, I mean, all hell can break loose if he hasn't been healthy enough to play until now. That would actually probably be my bigger worry if he was getting his first live reps against LSU, would be you've held him for this game, and have you been over aggressive in getting him back? Like, should you have held him out longer? And then if you end up with a re-injury, now you got big problems going throughout the year, right? So I think the nature of being able to lose multiple games means you could be a little bit more conservative with your injured players if you need to be, especially early in the year. So, look, I mean, if Lagway goes out there, doesn't take any snaps, goes out in the LSU game and starts limping around after he runs the ball with 5 minutes into the first quarter, there'll be a ton of criticism and probably rightly so, but I don't know. Like I'm not, I don't know what the injury report looks like. I don't know what the prognosis is on the injury. And without knowing that, it's really hard to decipher what is the right thing to do, quote unquote, for DJ Lagway. I think, again, in an ideal world, I'd love for Florida to be up by 50 points going into the second half against both of their first 2 opponents, and we get to see who the backup quarterback is, and we get all those true freshmen running around at wide receiver in the second half. Now, I mean, just that would be nice. I mean, we haven't had a game where Florida's been able to play its backups in the second half in quite a while. It would be nice to have one of those or a couple of those heading into this game, just from a confidence perspective. But my guess is, given sort of the timing of the injury, given the way Florida has played it thus far, my guess is Lagway is going to be on the field week 1. I
think so too.
I think that's where we're headed, but if he's not, it's not like an altogether freak out, unless the game against the Sharks is like 24-17, at which point we're freaking out no matter what's going on at that point.
Yeah, I think he'll be there too. So, yeah, I just wanted to get your opinion on that since I know we've kind of brushed on it, but, it's been, now 2 weeks of fall camp and, still nothing major for Lagway, but
3 more Saturdays, buddy. He's got 3 more Saturdays to get it right.
Like I said, I just think reading the tea leaves and kind of Napier today, I think it starts ramping up pretty soon.
You don't talk championship the way he did today, and championship practice and set those sort of expectations if you're not confident that your quarterback's going to be ready when you really need him to be. Right now, does that mean they're ultra conservative and he plays like a series against LIU? Sure, maybe they treat that like an NFL preseason game, right? Where Aaron Rodgers comes in, throws one pass, and all of a sudden, that's it, and we're on. I think Mahomes was 1 for 1 with a touchdown for like 7 yards in the preseason game for the Chiefs. Like, do you play it like that? Maybe. But then you come in the next week ready to go, and you strap it up for the first half, and then see where things lie, and then you're ready for when LSU comes or when you have to go to LSU. So. Look, I mean, everybody's dealing with it right now. I mean, I sent you an
Yeah.
article earlier this week about Nussmeier having knee injury
Right.
at LSU. So this is the thing: you get dinged throughout the year, and part of ability is availability, as cliche as that is. And Lagway obviously last year had some availability issues with the hamstring injury early on, during the Georgia game, and then some of the shoulder stuff that he's been dealing with this offseason that had happened even before the game against Miami. I don't think that's a pattern, but soft tissue injuries are a concern now that he's had 2 of them. And so obviously don't want to see that repeat itself. So get that kid in some yoga.
A lot of teams doing it apparently. So there we go. All right. Well, like I said, we had to take a left turn, talk a little bit of recruiting tonight, and did that with a big pickup there for the Gators from Davion Groce. And looking back at the scrimmage and Billy Napier's thoughts on that and DJ Lagway. So, well, I think since I teased it with you, I think, who cares? I'll wait a week. We'll talk the safety stuff next week.
Hey, that sounds good, man. I think there will probably be more stuff to talk about next week. So
yeah.
We'll see what pops up. But that's part of the chemistry you and I have, Dave. There's an ability to take a left turn when circumstances dictate. And certainly Florida Florida getting commits from top 50 guys, and having quarterbacks who are top 20 being projected going their way, to me constitutes as a significant change in the narrative around Billy Napier and the narrative around the program. So worth taking some time to talk about.
Boom. All right, there we go. Will Miles at Will Miles SEC. Ramping up Reading Reaction coverage soon. I mean, I know you're back from vacation, so
yeah, I just got back from the beach this week.
Yeah.
The magazine's actually on sale now, so if you want to go pick it up, readingreaction.com/MAG, readingreaction.com/mag. You can pick up the magazine. It's on sale, a couple bucks cheaper. It's been all year long since we got a few, or all summer long since we got a few. Only a few days left till the season, so the digital and hard copy version a little bit cheaper this month. So go check it out if you haven't yet. We think it's a cool magazine, so check it out over there. And yeah, we're gonna have stuff ramping up pretty soon. Obviously, it feels like we've been talking about the same stuff for about 4 months, just because there hasn't been a whole lot coming out, and with fall camp you're always sort of like fingers crossed, is that actually what's happening? So dude, real game's coming soon. It's the best time of year. It's like Christmas. Tell you, August 30th is like open up all the presents under the tree. Hopefully Santa Claus brings me something good this year.
yeah, for sure. Tired of the cold. All right, there we go. I guess it wasn't so much cold last year, but
It certainly felt like it at the Georgia game.
It did. At the beginning of the year, it did. All right, Will Miles, find him at Read and Reaction, his work. Him and Nick Newton right there. I'm David Waters right here on Gators Breakdown, everybody. Thanks for checking out this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.